Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan. And today we're going to do something kind of different. We're going to talk about utility rates, electric utility rates. This is how utilities make money. We understand that. Rates need to be fair and need to be paid by the public in order for our utilities to continue to provide reliable power. But over our years of investigating utility bills for a lot of different clients at EcoMotion, we found a lot of errors in rates that could be in the client's favor. So we thought we would take a kind of a dry topic and bring in my great colleague Michael Ware into the conversation to talk about utility rates and some of our experiences and to encourage those that haven't checked their rates to do so. So, greetings. Michael Ware from EcoMotion Solar Specialist, Senior Solar Specialist for 17 years.
Yeah.
Michael, good morning.
Good morning.
You seem cheerful today.
It's a great day.
It's another
in my world, it's a great day.
Another beautiful day in California, huh?
That's right. That's right.
Oh, that's great. You know, I was just introducing you and saying that we're going to try to take a pretty dry topic and have some fun with it and kick it around a little bit. But utility rates, you know, did you ever think that you would be so knee deep in understanding utility rate structures?
No, I can remember when I first got in the business and I had to have somebody explain to me the difference between a kilowatt and a kilowatt hour. And it took me a while to get that. And now I'm so far beyond that.
It's really something, isn't it? And
yeah.
there's lots of, we're going to mostly talk about commercial rates today.
Yeah.
And there's just lots of different options. I mean, you mentioned, you know, paying for energy in kilowatt hours. We're all familiar with kilowatt hours. Those are that's how we buy power as residential consumers. But then the commercial customers are paying demand. It's sort of it's a measure of the most capacity they would need at any one point, and the utilities have to be able to provide that, right?
Right.
So, and I know that there's lots of, you know, there's a history of cross subsidization. You know, industries pay the least for power. Commercial businesses usually pay the most for power. Residential is somewhere in between, and there's, you know, the utilities are regulated, and there's rate cases every 3 years or so, and there's always a big fight to see who has to pay for what. But for our clients, it's really important for them to know that they're on the right rate structure. So we're going to focus on rates. You know, I queued this off by saying you've been looking at this for years, but let's just start off with some your general notion of, like, having looked at utility bills for all these years. What have you found?
Well, I've found that, well, first, I equate a utility bill with the deep mysteries of the universe, that it takes a trained eye to actually understand and parse what's going on. And recently, it's even become more complicated with the advent of, like, CCAs, where you're getting your energy from one source and your delivery from another source. So it takes some training just to understand what the heck is in a bill. And I've noticed over the years that rate components are always in the state of flux, that the demand charges shift from regular charges to generation charges. When we first started our Solar Santa Monica program, the delivery portion of a rate was very minuscule. It was like 2 or 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And over the years, that has grown to be almost 50% of a kilowatt hour charge. So they've in that 20 years, they've shifted from, you know, a small charge to a great charge. And as I say, constant state of flux. You know, when we were in the throes of they called it the CSI program for solar, and California was kind of going crazy putting up solar. The utility very quietly launched this program called Option R that would lower the demand charges for solar users, but they hardly promoted it. You know, we were promoting it because we found this rate, but, you know, we were screaming it from the rooftops, but a lot of people had never heard of it. And that's what happens. You have to be kind of vigilant and on top of things as they change in order to understand, what your best rate options are.
Well, let's talk about option R just for a second, because I think it was a very solar friendly rate, right? And it's probably regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission. Thou shalt do this.
Yes.
And basically, a customer might invest in a big solar system, millions of dollars even for the school districts that we work with. And they would expect that, if they generate, the amount of power that they use throughout the course of the year, that you pretty much zero out your bill. But no, if you have to pay for demand charges, and there's any one 15-minute increment of the entire year where your demand hits, or the month, or demand hits a certain point, that pegs your demand charge. It meant that the savings just weren't there, right, for the solar companies,
Right,
or the solar customers.
Yeah, and this was what option R did was lower the cost per kW of demand, and what that greatly helped were businesses and schools and organizations that tended to set their peak hours outside of the solar hours. So, the solar is going to start in the morning and maybe peak at 2 in the afternoon and then subside. And if you set your peak at 8 a.m., you haven't really been able to take advantage of solar to knock your demand charges down. So this helped because it lowered that component of your bill. And so it was a great boon, and it was attached to a capacity limit, and it took them a few years, but they did reach that limit, like maybe in 2015 or so, and then it went away for Southern California Edison.
Right. And then what did it turn into?
It turned into another rate option now called E, which I'll talk about later, because that's one of the main rate differences that we look at. But
okay, so how do you? I mean, we've sort of queued this up, saying sometimes customers are on the wrong rate. How do you determine what the wrong rate is?
Well, it's wrong for them, or it's wrong for their particular mix of energy use. The only way we can tell is to create, it's like a digital map of their use. We call them interval data, and we're taking a snapshot of their total use every 15 minutes or maybe sometimes hourly throughout the whole year. So we know exactly how much power they're using and when they're using power, and then we use software to determine whether they would be better off on different rate choices, because some choices favor demand and some choices favor energy. So we have to look at it very specifically to know, well, what's your pattern of use and what rate is best for you.
And then some of them are time of use rates, so that's a whole other overlay. And then some of them they all have seasonal variations in price.
Yeah, exactly. The first thing that stands out to me when we analyze the bill is kind of the mix of demand charges to kilowatt hour charges, because often the kilowatt hour charges are higher. That they may be 60 to 70% of your bill, while demand charges would be 30 or 40% of your bill. And so there are some places where, oh, wow, look, your demand charges are over 50% of your bill. And that would be a reason to go and investigate and see if there's something wrong with the rates in the mix. So just to cover again what the difference is, the kilowatt charge is based on, it's the zenith of your demand in a whole billing period. So, let's say that you're a business that uses on the average 150 kilowatts at any one time. But on Fridays, you have a particular event that surges it up to 200. Well, you would be billed 200 for the whole month, not just that one day. So that's how kilowatt charges are set, and they're set in different time periods. There's one called non-coincident, which could be anytime you use power. Then there's another demand charge that's specifically for your peak period, which is now 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. You pay another charge for the highest use of kW in that period. And then there's a mid-peak period. So we look at all of those. Now, the kilowatt hour, as you said, was in the time of use category. So we know that your highest rates are going to be from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. and outside of that are generally what mid-peak hours are. And then overnight and in the early mornings, they call those off-peak or super off-peak, and the rates are generally lower. It's interesting today with the amount of solar on the grid in California. The lowest rates often are in the morning, in the maybe up till about 2 p.m. when solar is generating a lot, and so and the cost of the rates tends to drop a little bit.
You know,
But
I know we want to, sorry to interrupt. I know we want to, when we're talking about rates and being on the right rate or the wrong rate, but this analysis, like you talked about, when you look at the interval data, you look at every 15 minutes, how much power is being used. And if somebody is using a lot of power during the peak period, you know, that would also be an opportunity to sort of look at, you know, load management. You know, what can you do in the building to shift your load so that you're not using it? So it's, I think drilling into this data is really key. You're unlocking a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, you know, firms that have staff that specifically look at this, you know, can decide how to manage their use. Like, don't turn on that machine after 4 p.m. You know, make sure you turn it off by 3:55. Other businesses don't have a person looking at that, or businesses that have invested in management software that warns them about their peak use and so forth can help out tremendously.
But a school district or some multi-facility corporate client, all the bills are going to some payment processing office within the school district office, and they're not looking at each bill carefully. They're just not discerning. And then even if they did, they probably wouldn't understand it. It takes a lot of, like you said, it's a bit of a maze.
Yeah, well, I have a term for that too. I call it spreadsheetitis. That the bills are lifted from the face of the bill where there's a great amount of detail to a whole list of total charges, and then in the end, a CEO or somebody would say, over this year we paid $45,832 and used 3 million kilowatt hours, and that's all they know. They have no way to parse and how could we have managed that better. They just see a bottom line figure and don't understand how it might be affected.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought I would use Southern California Edison rates as an example. You know, most people in California get their power from either PG&E up north or Southern California Edison in basically LA and Orange County and east to the border, and then or San Diego Gas and Electric, down below about basically Orange County to San Diego. So those are the three main rates, and most of our customers, are on one of those rates. But and they kind of follow similar patterns. But I just wanted to explain that with, for instance, Southern California Edison, your basic rate is called GS1, and that has no demand charges, and it's basically for small businesses or small apartment buildings or small users. And you can be on that rate if you use less than 20 kilowatts at any one time during the billing cycle, 20 kilowatts. Then the next category is GS2, and that's for users that are between 20 kilowatts and 200 kilowatts of demand at any one cycle in the month. And then the next rate is GS3, and those are for customers using more than 200, but less than 500. And this starts to be pretty big users, like high schools might be on this rate, or they might tip over to the next rate. Large office buildings might be on this rate. Some schools would be on this rate. The biggest rate category is called TOU8, and that's for customers who have greater than 500 kW of demand, and that's pretty big. That's like a big office building, or maybe a city hall in a big city. So now in Southern California Edison, with each of these rate categories, you have two options within that rate category. You can opt for slightly higher demand charges and slightly lower energy charges, kilowatt hour charges, or you can do the opposite. You say, I want the rate that charges me more for demand and less for kilowatt hours. And so,
and how would you know? How would you know which way to go?
Well, you have to look at it very specifically, and I'll give you an example. Let's say that there are two restaurants. They're similar size, but restaurant A only serves lunch. And so, they come in and get fired up around 9 or 10 in the morning, and they're finished by 2 o'clock, and they've pegged the meter at, let's say, 120 kilowatt during that time. Now, the restaurant right next door, similar size, but they serve all 3 meals. Now, they also, at each meal, reach about 120 kilowatts during the busy period. But since they're serving 3 meals, they're using 3 times the amount of energy. So both A and B would pay the same rate, the same amount for demand charges, but B has 3 times the energy use. So we would look at which one they fare better on, and probably A would be better off lowering their demand charges and paying the higher energy charges, because it's only a third of what they're doing. Restaurant B uses 3 times the amount of energy, so they probably need to have lower energy charges and higher demand charges. So that's kind of an extreme example of how you can have the same bill on completely different energy profiles, and we would look to see which one was right.
Right. And then we've found over the years that sometimes clients that have many meters, some of them just end up on the wrong rate for some reason. Like they mysteriously migrate.
Well, over the years, they've, these options I was just talking about for Southern California Edison, they call them D with the higher demand rates and E with the lower demand rates. But D used to be B a long time ago, and E used to be A or R, and they get automatically migrated. And this is keeping their energy pattern from maybe 20 years ago. Since if they have modified their demand in terms of, they revamp their air conditioning load, or they, a lot of companies have gone to LEDs and lowered their total, demand by 20 or 30%. So you don't know unless you really look and delve into it if that has kept pace or you're slightly on the wrong rate. And one of the things about being on the wrong rate is, let's say that one rate was only $5,000 better than the other rate. Well, if you don't notice it for 10 years, suddenly that's a $50,000 problem. Yeah. So if you don't look at it and you don't know, you haven't kept up with the. You
could just be paying a lot more than you needed to. Michael, this is good stuff. Let's dive into some case studies, and we've got about 6 that we want to just quickly flag for their relevance. But Santa Monica, you and I have been working for the city of Santa Monica for 17 years, and you were looking at all their municipal facilities just to see what was happening, and you came across this water treatment plant with this anomaly.
Yeah, well, the anomaly was that Santa Monica is served by Southern California Edison, but they have this giant water treatment plant that is like 1 block outside the city limits. So it's served by LADWP. And so what I noticed was that they were paying a 12.5% utility users tax on that bill when it should have been exempt. All of their Edison bills were exempt from user taxes, but I couldn't understand why they kept charging, and so it was an enormous amount. That amount for the water treatment plant, their 15% of their electrical use ended up being like almost $300,000
per year.
So
per year,
a year, and then nobody noticed it, and it had been going on like that for years and years and years. So it took a while. We had to petition the city and petition LADWP and say there's no reason for them to be paying this rate. They're a municipal facility and they are exempt. And they finally agreed. And since we discovered that, Santa Monica has saved over $3 million for something that they probably still to this day would not have noticed if we hadn't pointed it out to them, because it's.
And didn't you ask for like 10% of that savings at one point?
I forgot. I forgot
You just
to
done
cash in
good.
on that. Yeah.
I'll dive in with another quick case study that we had in Garden Grove. We were working for the school district there, and they have 62 campuses. This is back in the days of Prop 39. There was a lot of special money in California for school districts to invest in energy efficiency primarily. And one of the requirements was that you had to do audits of all the facilities. And as part of our auditing process, we decided, let's gather all the electricity bills for each campus. Let's gather all the natural gas bills for each campus. Let's gather all the water bills. And I remember being challenged on the water. Somebody just saying, why would you bother focusing on water? And I just said, I think it's really an important, water pumping and movement of water in California is the biggest use of electricity in the state. So if water use is very much tied to energy use, directly tied. So, but long story short, we took a look we benchmarked all the schools for each of those utilities, and focusing right in on water, we benchmarked all the schools, and somebody at the school district was looking at one of our graphs and saying, wait a second, that particular campus is closed. And why is it using that much water per year? It was like right up with the campuses that were operating. Well, it turns out that analysis, that quick analysis, just quickly looking at the bills, the consumption patterns, revealed a major water leak that probably had been going on for years. And it's just like Mike with this water treatment plant in Santa Monica, probably would have been going on for years and years because nobody would have ever noticed it. So just checking all of the utility bills makes a lot of sense. Should we go to Orange Unified School District?
Yeah, and this is a case where it just fell off somebody's to-do list. We worked with Orange Unified in terms of scoping out their solar potential, helping them go out to market, and selecting a provider that could install solar. And when that part of the job was finished, our last instructions to them were, make sure that when you add the solar, you change the rates to the favorable solar rate, which will be option E. And at that point, I don't know if it was because of personnel changes or whatever, they didn't do it. So, they asked us a year or two later with, I think, the new people in place, said, hey, how are we doing on our solar? Are we saving money? And got their bills. And sure enough, one of them had not been transitioned over. And we pointed out that one bill, had it been on the right account, would save them $70,000 a year. So sometimes it's like, I'm sure that they were well-intentioned. They understood our instructions at the time, but there was no oversight. So either keep hiring us so that we can keep looking at your bills and not let you make those mistakes, or it wasn't on their radar necessarily to examine that. So yeah. that was a big one.
Another complexity of that particular school district, I remember, is that it has some campuses that are in the Anaheim Public Utilities Service territory and some that are in the Edison territory. And when we were framing up solar and looking at the feasibility of solar, there was a big difference in economics between the two utilities.
Yeah. For two reasons. One is because Anaheim changed their net metering policy, and two is they tended to have lower rates. So the delta of savings sometimes is lower if solar is coming in on a very low rate, like you're saving 5 cents instead of 20 cents. So yeah, that's something that we look at too for schools in the solar space. So like, how would offsetting this rate, affect your savings?
Good stuff. Let's go down to the Mexican border. We've been working for a school district down there for a number of years. We put solar on every campus and the district office and the transportation facility, and we were just asked to go back in and, after the solar's been operating for a few years, and do a performance verification. And what do we find?
Well, overall, we found out that the solar, there are 49 sites around the district, the 47 schools, and then the district office and the transportation department, that overall, the advent of solar has saved them over $4 million from what they would have paid on the same rates if they stayed on the rates they were on and had never done solar. We saved them $4 million. But a deeper look showed that not every rate switch was executed properly. So, our final instructions were all of these rates should be changed over to the solar friendly rate at SDG&E. That's called DGR. And I think that's distributed generation renewable is technically what it stands for. But the shift didn't completely happen as we asked for, and some were placed on what they call ALDGR, which has a demand response component, and ended up charging the district more than they should have. It wasn't really right for a solar, a meter with solar to be on that rate. And so, just ticking through those 29 campuses that were misassigned a rate, that would be about $76,000 of savings a year if they got off that. So, but they don't know, unless we tell them. And I don't think that the utilities are really staffed to look at this minutia. If you called them and said specifically, should I be on this rate or not? They might be able to tell you, but they don't. They're not proactive about it. They don't call up customers and say, I think you could benefit if you shifted from this rate to this rate. They would respond, but maybe it's because they're overloaded. Maybe it's because, customer choices are too individual. I don't know. But I just know that it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, this just slipped through the cracks. And like you're saying, in this particular evaluation that we just completed, maybe $70,000 of savings a year. The other one we were talking about, Orange Unified, another $70,000 a year. City of Santa Monica, $300,000 a year. So being on let's call it being on the wrong rate structure, or inversely, not being on the optimal rate structure is costly. And it's an important opportunity, because think what you could do with that money. I mean, the school districts could have an arts program or invest in more energy efficiency and use that to leverage even greater savings. But
it quickly
it's money on the table.
The new normal. You say, okay, I'm used to seeing this account costing me $53,000, and so you don't question it until someone comes along and says, oh no, that should only cost $47,000 if you were on the right rate. We found the same thing at San Diego Community College when we were looking through their rates, because they had put solar on meters and had been there for years. But for all of the years that it had been there, they were never on the right rate. So, we come in 2023, I think it was, and say, yeah, you need to shift these to a better rate. But who knows, they had lost untold thousands of dollars by not being on that rate initially. And I don't know, did their solar installer tell them? Did they not know? Was it a change of personnel? They weren't looking. What happened? We were happy to remedy it, but too bad that they didn't know a long time ago.
Now we tapped into something similarly. We've been working for LA Metro now for like 14 years, I think it is. And remember, we had that one. There was one of those divisions, what they called their maintenance facility. They called them divisions, but there was one division that wasn't getting net energy metering credit. Is that right?
Well, yeah, it turned out that they had signed a non-export agreement, which they shouldn't have signed, and that they agreed, like way back in 2012 or something. Okay, we will not export anything to the grid, and what they got in exchange for that was not as much as they would have gotten had they been exporting to the grid and getting credit for their extra solar kWh exports. So, we gave them a whole map of how to fix that problem.
Yep. And then in Santa Monica, I think the Civic Center parking structure was there was an issue there. I can't remember whether the inverter was down or it wasn't. They weren't getting net energy metering credit, or there was something that we uncovered through some analysis that, again, resulted in savings of tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, this was a really funny one, because the giant meter that runs the parking lot is what the solar was supposed to be connected to, and then that solar energy would offset those charges. Instead, inadvertently, the solar, and this was way before our time, the solar was inadvertently connected to the tiny little meter that runs the inverter, And so it meant that 99.99% of the solar energy was just going back into the grid and not offsetting the bill at all. And everybody just took it for normal until we did a deep dive. And again, that happened before our time, and how that wasn't uncovered, how they didn't know in year one, hey, where are our savings?
Yeah, we're working in the last of the case studies. We're working in the city of Chino and their police department facility, which is a refurbished Home Depot, big building. It turns out that's been on a critical peak pricing rate that your analysis suggests is the wrong rate in that application.
Yeah, it's not as egregious as $100,000, but I remember when the utilities introduced these things, and basically they all said, here's the deal. We're going to give you a discount on your demand rates during the summer. And in exchange for that, if we have what we call a critical peak day, that's when the grid is really stressed, and we need you to cut back power between the hours of, let's say, 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. on a certain day. And they warn you in advance. They tell you the day before, got to cut power. Because then they jack up the kilowatt hour price from 60 cents to $2.80 for that time. So the carrot is the reduced demand rates. The stick is these enormous kilowatt hour rates. And if you can't respond, if you're a facility that can't suddenly cut power, then you're going to wind up paying more in the penalty charges for the kilowatt hours than you got in relief for the demand charges. So it reminds me of, often you do a subscription to something, a trial subscription, and you make yourself a note. I got to check this in a year and see if it still works.
Yeah.
That's what happened. They said, hey, don't worry, for the first year, we'll make sure that you're not upside down on your bill. If this program cost you more than it saved you, then it's okay for you to terminate. But a lot of people didn't terminate it after the first year, and then they never looked at it again. And then so that's something that we could help people with, and either say, if you have the ability to avoid this use, do it. If you don't have the ability, then you need to get off this rate because it's penalizing you. It's not helping you.
Yeah. Something we've really not talked about in this conversation is the price of power, and how the price of power has just escalated dramatically and continues to escalate dramatically, right? So you mentioned that critical peak pricing, at those critical peak periods, maybe $1 a kilowatt hour. I used to think where I live here in Glendale that I was paying 16 cents a kilowatt hour. I think now the base rate is more like 24 cents. So I've had a 50% sort of jump since I even last thought about it. And
right.
This makes all of this analysis, all of this checking bills, especially if you're a school district or a corporate client or somebody's using a lot of power, this makes all of it, just sort of amplifies the value of what we're talking about. Any parting shots, Mr. Ware?
It seems like it's well worth someone's time and energy and payment to invest in this rate check. Yep. And say, especially if you've got a lot of meters. If you've got a lot of meters, we have a certain amount of data in our hands just because we're servicing a lot of different companies and a lot of different cities. I've looked at the data we have, and I'll find, you could save $873. There's a theater in one of the cities that could save $24,000 a year if they rate switched. There's a business office in Camarillo that tomorrow could save $50,000 a year if they did a rate shift. So these opportunities are probably there, and unless you have the staff to unearth them yourselves, you should seriously seek a rate analysis.
Thanks, Michael. Great conversation.
Thanks, Ted.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's EcoLogic. We'll see you next time.